This is going to be an open debate. I'm not supposed to be the moderator, so we just openly talk about what's going on, I guess, in emerging markets. And let's start maybe introducing ourselves. You start, Nick, so people knows who they're talking with, or
All right, Nicolas Berthet, founder of Galloy and Blink, formerly known as Bitcoin Beach Wallet. It's a wallet that started in El Salvador that now have users in many countries around the world, except US and some other OFAC sanctioned countries. So we have some view about where Lightning is being used. But mainly our user base in El Salvador today.
Hi everyone, I'm Abubakar Nur Khalil. I'm a Nigerian Bitcoin Core developer. I also run a Bitcoin VC called Cursive Capital, and I'm also one of the board members and the interim CEO of a non-for-profit called B-Trust, where we essentially give out grants to Global South developers, specifically in Africa, as well as training developers through a program we call B-Trust Builders. Other than that, I just do Bitcoin Core work, essentially.
Hi everyone, my name is Ricky. I'm an Italian podcaster and content creator. I actually am an activist. I started working in human rights in Italy. That's how I discovered Bitcoin. And I chronicle Bitcoin adoption in emerging markets and hyperinflating economies.
Hi, my name is Francisco Calderon. I'm a software developer, originally from Venezuela, now living in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I'm dedicating on coding on mostly on Lightning Network, and currently working on LMP2P bot, which is a Telegram bot which allows people to do peer-to-peer, mostly focus on emerging markets. And now I'm doing a new version of this bot called, on top of Noster to fight against censorship resistant. So it's called Mostro, and tomorrow I'm gonna talk about it.
Nice. One of the reasons why I'm really happy there is the Human Rights Foundation sponsoring this stage, and Riga, the Baltic Honey Badger, is paying attention to what's going on in emerging market, is that Bitcoin as a humanitarian tool is a subject that it's still not prevalent in the narrative surrounding Bitcoin. In the country I come from, Europe, Italy, Europe, Bitcoin is still perceived as an investment, as an asset, as something that is been made to make rich richer. And with my work, what I'm trying to do all over the world is prove Bitcoiners, especially in the first world, that this is so wrong. So, for example, Abu, I'd like to start with you. As you just said, you're not only a developer, you have a VC firm that is actually investing in technology made in Africa for Africans, but not only. I recently traveled in a couple of African countries. We met there, and I was astonished by the talent I found in Africa. Young developers, super skilled, hyper talented. From your perspective as a VC in this case, what's the buzz? What's going on in Africa? Why there is so much going on there?
I mean, first and foremost, you're definitely right. I think the talent thing, just to get on that quickly, has a lot to do with having a lot of adversity that forces people into situations where they have to think up solutions at a rapid pace that is unparalleled globally, in my opinion. And just to give out, demographics with regards to Africa is, Africa has the youngest population. So I mean, from ages 25 below is over 60% of our population. And in the country where I'm from, Nigeria, that's actually over 70% of our population is below the age of 25. So you have a ton of excellent talent from that pool that just constantly is thriving and trying to kind of get ahead on the economic stand. So I think when it comes to the way I look at the VC landscape and kind of how things have evolved, I've noticed that Bitcoin, yes, was introduced through scams and BitConnect and all of that. And initially that had like bad sentiment for a lot of people, but then over time a lot of people started to realize the utility on the ground, which was this is money that actually works for people from that part of the world. Where ordinarily, if we're trying to, either set up TransferWise or a dollar account or things like that, first and foremost is a privileged thing to do. Not a lot of people have the documentation, not because they don't want to get documentation, but because of the difficulties, the bureaucracy, and the requirements on the financial side actually to have like property, rent, an address, things like that. So there are already all those challenges that people were facing. And then Bitcoin came across and people were like, okay, this is an alternative for us that we could actually use. I mean, what other options do we have? And then fast forward 5 years from that, people have just continued to increase the understanding that they have of the utility that Bitcoin brings to the table, from not just remittances, where a lot of people started paying school fees, not just financial freedom, the ability to actually become an economic participant at a global level, not only just on the mining side, which for the first time after decades and decades of failed promises of trying to electrify through IMF debt, now we could actually do viably through Bitcoin mining. So the argument has been won from that end. I think the combination of all these opportunities and use cases that Bitcoin uniquely solves that already is gaining traction on the ground year on year in Africa is why you tend to see fledgling companies coming out of that part of the world.
Interesting. Of course, beside Africa, there is Central America, there is South America, similar problems, but different features. Among Bitcoiners, El Salvador is super popular, Nicholas, because of Bitcoin being legal tender there, the Bitcoin country. But people tend to forget that you guys were there first. You started to work with the guys of the Bitcoin Beach on the first circular economy experiment in El Zonte, El Salvador, and that was something that then El Salvador as a country took and promoted on a nation scale. So I'd like to know from you, Nicholas, what was the situation in El Salvador when you first went there before the legal tender?
Thanks for the credit. I don't know if, I think Bitcoin would still have become legal tender without this, let's say, El Zonte experiment. It may have helped, right? For me, there was a starking element on the before and after the law, which was a politicization of Bitcoin. When we went there in 2020, so 1 year before Bitcoin became law, like people were trying to grab their head around Bitcoin for what it was, right? Like an electronic money system. The challenge in El Salvador, and I guess for developing country in general, is that people are not used to volatility, or like, I mean, maybe in Argentina or like in other places, they're used to volatility in one way, which is like, okay, the money will lose value, but Bitcoin is, volatility in both ways, and actually it's going the right direction over time. But so people have a hard time grasping what volatility for Bitcoin is. I think that's one of the main elements for why there is maybe slower adoption that I would want in El Salvador. Is because if you are used to the US dollar, okay, there is sure over time your $5 bill lose money, but not from day to day, right? Or at least it's not material. But anyway, to come back to your question, yeah, people were saying, okay, it's like an electronic wallet and I can send money, and they was often impressed by it. What was challenging, like, but okay, if the price go down tomorrow and I receive $5, but tomorrow it's like $4.50, like they think they are scammed. That's still one of the most challenging points. And actually the law become into effect at the peak of the 2021 market. Like, I think September was $60-something thousand, and like 1 month later is when it became legal tender, and from here it went down to like 75% or 80%, and so people that were onboarded by the government, like unless they stick around long enough, they lost money and they lost trust in the currency. And now the trust is going back slowly and it's building, but when become legal tender, Bitcoin became legal tender in El Salvador because it was Bukele that mandate the Bitcoin law, and initially the law was, at least it's still the case in the law, it's like, if you in El Salvador, you have to accept Bitcoin. Like people were like, but what is Bitcoin? And okay, Bukele is controlling Bitcoin, and is it people didn't understand the fact that Bitcoin is an independent currency, and actually the president of El Salvador cannot do anything on the currency. And I think that's still something that most Salvadorians will have no clue about, right, today. So yeah, I guess the politicization of Bitcoin is like really the surprising element to something that was very apolitical before the law to something that was very, very, very political after the law. I think over time, this like, okay, the money of Bukele ID like slowly disappear. People maybe see that, and I think there is less talk about. I'm living in El Salvador now, and like, I think there was over the last year one time the main newspaper had a front page on Bitcoin. It was when it reached new all-time high 6 months ago. But yeah, there is no generally a lot of information about Bitcoin at this time by the mainstream media. Like it's just some people use it, and of course there is education now that try to bring people to Bitcoin and really help them understand what Bitcoin is. Not in a forced way, but like you should really use it. It will be beneficial for you in the long term. But, yeah.
Education is critical everywhere. It's such a hard concept to grasp. Francisco, you are a Venezuelan that lives in Argentina. Where should I start from?
Yes. I love inflation.
So, recently Maduro made the news again. In your original country, a lot of protests. It's still kind of hard to get in Venezuela and tell Bitcoin-related stories from Venezuela. I have a lot of Venezuelan friends. I know there is a Bitcoin scene in Venezuela as well. What's going on there?
Well,
so let's start from your Venezuelan side.
The thing is, for example, miners, they have to hide. For a long time, they have to hide because the government take them and put them in the jail or start to ask them money to keep them working with the mining. And I know a guy that was in jail. I have a friend that was in jail, and now the government they made like a law for legalization of mining that everyone knows that we can work with the government. So if you say to the government, okay, I'm going to mine, you are giving him a tool for they are going to after you if they change their mind. That what happened, because they made a shitcoin called Petro, and surprise, that didn't work.
That didn't went well.
Yes. And after that, they say, oh, this was all corruption, the Petro. And they put in jail the guy who was in charge of that institution, and they started to, they say, we can't mine anymore. So they started to find, they look, oh, who were mining? Oh, we're going for everyone. So everyone started shut down the miners. So they are, they know this guy. So this guy, now they can mine in secret because they know them. And so like this is only one example. So people don't have liberty to say I have Bitcoin because the government will go after you. But still there are some places where you can pay with Bitcoin, stuff like that. But if I were living there, I think I will try to avoid letting people that I want to pay with Bitcoin, because there are the basic liberties there are done. So it's a very difficult situation there right now there.
And what about Argentina? When did you move there?
9 years ago.
9 years ago,
Yes.
so it's been a lot of time. And recently there is a new president elected in Argentina, Javier Milei, that made once again the news among Bitcoiners because he called himself anarcho-capitalism, and he kind of promised or hinted to a kind of a legal tender in Argentina. Then probably things went on a different way. What's going on there? What's your feeling from someone that is not only reading the Bitcoin Twitter, that it's kind of misleading if you if you didn't realize? What's going on there?
The thing is, when someone that has like some kind of power and say the word Bitcoin, it gets like a meme. When Milei says Bitcoin is a response against the injustices of politicians printing money, he said that. He didn't say he was a Bitcoiner. So that was like went in Twitter like millions of views. And everyone started to say, oh, Argentina is going to have a Bitcoiner president. But it's not. He's kind of libertarian, like economically libertarian, but is conservative with all other stuff, like religion, all the other stuff. So he's not completely libertarian. And also, he's not Bitcoiner. He was, in fact, he was supporting a shitcoin. He was in his Instagram. He was sponsoring that shitcoin. That went to zero, scam a lot of people, by the way. News. Good. So he said like he's not going to put not even the dollar as a legal tender. He said like he will have a law to open the system to people choose their own currency. So people, in theory,
market.
yes, in theory you could pay with Bitcoin everywhere if the other part accept Bitcoin. But we can do that now. So it's I don't know exactly what is in mind, but the truth is inflation stopped right now. So we have more or less like a normal country, and at this moment, but I don't see like any. Nothing is going to happen with Bitcoin from the government, and I think it's okay. I think Bitcoin should be used from bottom to top.
I agree. Talking about the Bitcoin Twitter, on the Bitcoin Twitter there are those human beings that call themselves toxic maximalists. I don't know if you heard about those. Usually they live in Europe or in the US. They comfortably sit on a couch and order food and delivery. And they think that there should be only Bitcoin, everyone should adopt Bitcoin, period. But when I travel in the emerging markets, what I see is a completely different reality. And as a storyteller, I tell what I see. For example, I see that everywhere there is a huge demand for stablecoins, like it or not. Those toxic maximalists usually think that custodial lightning is not Bitcoin. But wherever I travel, I see a lot of need and adoption via custodial wallet first. Someone even consider Lightning not Bitcoin, and still there is a lot of adoption on the Lightning network. Or Bitcoin should be store of value and not medium of exchange. Bullshit. What's going on?
I think over time, people just have to realize and be okay with the fact that we live in a world that's utility driven, and Bitcoin maximalists, the one that you just described and branded on Twitter, do not materially affect the space. To be honest with you, the only sphere of influence they have is online through, you know, the realm of characters that they're able to push out. On the ground, really all that matters to people is that this works for me, this meets my demands, and this protects my, you know, economic interests, things like that. And it's funny you mentioned the stablecoin situation. So a lot of, even the Bitcoiners on the ground in Africa, ironically, still see a lot of the high volumes, but kind of deny the utility that's there on the ground. But it's not a case of it's like a conspiracy or maybe stablecoins are 10x better than Bitcoin. It's just about real economics at the end of the day. Like, it's cheap access to US dollars, which a lot of countries in Africa do not have access to. Because if you want to have access to dollars in a lot of these countries, especially in Nigeria, for example, you need to have a domiciliary account, which again, back into the documentation side. And even if you do have that, it's very difficult to make a payment to someone in the US, for example, or someone outside of the world. So for them, it's an in into something that already had a huge amount of demand prior to Bitcoin. So they're just translating all the unrealized, essentially all the unrealized kind of interest into using the US dollar into stablecoins. So it's not that there's something kind of new happening, and we're just seeing kind of the consequences of not having cheap access to dollars, really. And then on the Bitcoin side, yes, it still continues to remain at the center of the entire ecosystem in the sense that BTC USDT pairs having there, or BTC NGN, for example. So to comfort some of the maxis before they start whining, like, there's a bright future for Bitcoin. It's just not in the way in which that they kind of perceive it through their armchair philosophy. It's going to be through utility, through having products and services that actually work on the ground, that meet the demands of the people on the ground. And thank God we have builders who are very realistic here on the continent, who we're supporting through B-Trust, for example, that are actually building those type of tools that solve real-time problems. For example, MavaPay, which allows for people to send a Lightning invoice, make a payment, and then get actual Naira into their Naira account within like a minute. So there is utility happening. It's just that it's difficult to see that when you're going through all the philosophizing on your end and not actually seeing things on the ground, which is why I prioritize writing for Forbes and kind of documenting that through last year all the way up to this year to help assuage these fears.
Nick, you have a company that has a wallet that is custodial and there is a stable coin in it. Gosh, you are so evil. Why? Tell me.
I mean, I think there is a interesting story if you think about El Salvador. They gave up their currency 20 years ago. When, as a country, you give up your currency and you adopt the US dollar, to some extent, like, it may be good for the population because now, you know, US dollar is the best fiat coin out there, right? It's the one that has the lowest inflation. I mean, it's not perfect because there is inflation, and of course there's a lot of surveillance to it. But El Salvador had a 20-year head start to move from a local currency, very high inflation, to the best fiat currency the world has today. And it's probably by no mistake that El Salvador is one of the first countries to have adopting Bitcoin as legal tender, is that El Salvador already didn't have a printing press, right? And this is probably one of the hardest steps for a country or for like a government to give away this massive power of like printing money out of thin air. But when you think in Nigeria, for instance, you know, this is the actual process happening. It's like, and this is why the Nigeria government, at least this is my interpretation of why this government is so volatile in their position vis-a-vis of Bitcoin and stablecoin, is basically, and why there is high inflation is because the Nigerians stop believing in their local currency because of the inflation. And there is a feedback loop. You know, the more they destroy the currency, the more they're going to seek alternative. And right now, it's very natural to go to the US dollar, typically over a stable coin, you know, maybe StableSat, because it's perceived as the best, you know, fiat currency out there. And they have a massive upgrade going from NGN to like USD, like suddenly you don't lose as much in inflation. You know, it seems you don't lose anything if you compare it with a Nigerian rate, right? And for me, that's a steps. You know, it's steps one, and it's both a step for the individual, but also for the country, to some extent. Then steps two is okay for the individual to realize that, you know what, if I own US dollar, maybe if I use Tether, but actually Tether might disappear tomorrow. But most people don't think about that. You know, in Nigeria, like they're happy to get some money that, you know, is not being devalued overnight, and they can just live for another day or another week, and that's suddenly a better saving instrument than, you know, NGN. They will need more education to go from US dollar to Bitcoin. I will come back to what I said earlier. The main hurdle today for a Salvadorian is the volatility, right? And of course, volatility is a feature of Bitcoin. It's not a bug. But you need to really understand Bitcoin deep enough to understand why it's not a bug. And it takes time. You know, typically, it's like you have to live through the cycle and, you know, stomach this volatility to say, yeah, actually, okay, maybe I had this, you know, difficult period, but over time, this money will accrue compared to any other fiat currency, because governments have infinite debts that they will monetize, and so Bitcoin will prevail. Like, but you need to have the saving to go over this cycle. Most people don't have this saving, which is why certainly fiat currency or fiat currency on a blockchain or stablecoins, which doesn't use a blockchain, are a very powerful tool and a step, you know, in the right direction.
Francisco, why a Lightning company, a Lightning protocol in South America?
Why?
Why you're working on it? Why you think it matters?
I think Lightning, for me, I started Bitcoin when I understood all these Austrian economic things, but I used Bitcoin before without understanding. But when I understood Bitcoin, I had to quit my job and dedicate to this. But I work specifically on Lightning because I think Lightning brings Bitcoin to the real life. Because with Lightning we can go to the street and buy something, and we can go and buy bread or asking or a beer without waiting for a confirmation, without paying too much for a small amount or for something that is very cheap. So for people that need to buy and don't care about anything else, they work, they need to buy. It's very useful, and that's why I'm working on Lightning. Then about what you were talking about, this idea of the people, like they call themselves maximalists, that they decide what to do or what not to do with Bitcoin, or what is Bitcoin. I think it's important to remember to these people, because I don't consider myself maximalist. People consider myself maximalist. But I think we all are on Bitcoin because we know that something is wrong, and we are like, we have to, we have to think out of the box. So, but we came to Bitcoin, and we can just think about one idea and don't try to break that idea. We still have to think ideas or ways to fix and make it adapted to the people, to the reality. It's not only for people that is behind a screen and buy online. It's to make people, mostly in the third world, because in the first world, I think the financial system works, but in the third world, nothing works. And in the financial system, less. In fact, there is a lot of people that don't have identity, for example, so they don't have access to the financial system. So with Bitcoin, and specifically Lightning, we can give them a chance to enter to the commercial, to buy, to have their own, don't depend on other people. So I think we have to keep like, I don't remember the word, but in English, but it's like a, don't sit and
Say it in Spanish.
yes, it's like a, don't sit and believe that you know everything, because you have to go outside and see what happens with the people, what needs the people. Myself, I don't like to use stablecoin, but I know that they're very useful. There are a lot of use cases. There are a lot of commerce in Argentina that they can manage to the volatility on Bitcoin because they have to pay daily to their workers. So if Bitcoin goes down in the day, they have to put their own pocket to pay to their workers. So we have to open our mind.
Definitely. I think our time is up, Ben, if I right. So just a quick wrap. There are a lot of lessons to be learned on Bitcoin coming from emerging markets. Emerging markets in the foreseeable future will be a huge drive for adoption and for new technology. And look at this table. We have Central America, we have Africa, we have South America. What is missing? Asia. I recently traveled to Asia for the first time. There is a huge potential there. India and Pakistan, more than 1.5 billion people. Asia is huge, and there is a huge language barrier between us. So it's gonna be probably hard to build a bridge from us to Asia, but I think it's something that we should work hard to build in the next future, because from there is gonna come a lot of adoption and super interesting technology. So thanks to the HRF for the great job they are doing, and thank you guys, and thank you for watching. Back to you, Ben.